It's April 1st, 2019, and it's time to review 5 of the most outrageous, infuriating, or just plain baffling things that have happened lately. It's your Facepalm 5. Let's count them up. Number 1. Republican member of Congress sues Twitter. Representative Devin Nunez of California's 22nd Congressional District hasn't been having a very fun year so far. When the new Democratic majority took office in January, he lost his position as chair of the House Intelligence Committee. His arch-nemesis, Democrat and fellow Californian Adam Schiff, became the new chair of the committee and made investigating Nunez's ally Donald Trump a top priority. And to top it all off, people have been super mean to him on Twitter. So mean, in fact, that 2 weeks ago, Representative Devin Nunez filed a defamation lawsuit against Twitter for $250 million. Now, look, I'm not opposed in principle to people using lawsuits in an attempt to force Twitter to take more responsibility for the sort of conduct and content it allows on its platform, but for such a case to have even a chance of succeeding, the plaintiff would have to have a legitimate grievance. I'm no lawyer, but something tells me one of the most powerful legislators in the country asking for damages because some people on Twitter made fun of him is not going to be the watershed case that finally compels social media networks to seriously address online harassment. Also, can I take a second to note what a disingenuous crybaby Nunez is? He's not only suing Twitter itself, but also a few individual Twitter users, including Devin Cow, a parody account that adopts the persona of a cow that mostly talks about what a colossal dipshit Devin Nunez is, or as the lawsuit calls it, vicious defamation. Did Anita Sarkeesian ever sue Twitter, or YouTube, or any other social media platform for the avalanche of utterly undeserved harassment she's received? Have survivors of hate crimes inspired by the scores of neo-Nazis active online ever sued Twitter for hosting them and thereby facilitating their acts of violence and intimidation? I don't think so. But the ranking Republican on the House Intelligence Committee and unwavering supporter of Donald goddamn Trump, he's had enough. Okay, dude. Number 2, Republican senator proposes asinine solution to climate change. Jumping to the other chamber of the United States Congress, last week Republican Senator Mike Lee of Utah took to the Senate floor to speak against the Green New Deal, a proposal to commit the government to taking sweeping, substantial action to combat climate change. Most of Lee's remarks were delivered tongue-in-cheek. He displayed images of Luke Skywalker riding a tauntaun and Aquaman astride a seahorse, suggesting that future residents of Alaska and Hawaii will be forced to resort to such methods of transportation. None of this was nearly as funny as Lee apparently thought it would be, but jokes told by Republicans rarely are. The funny bit of Lee's speech came at the end, when he turned from mocking the plight of coming generations of climate refugees and offered his own alternative to the Green New Deal. Apparently in earnest, Lee proposed that the real solution to climate change is for more people to get married and have babies. I swear to God, I'm not making this up. Here, listen to him for yourself.
You know where the solution can be found, Mr. President? In churches, in wedding chapels, in maternity wards across the country and around the world. Mr. President, this is the real solution to climate change. Babies.
You know what? I changed my mind. This isn't funny either. This is horrifying. This man is a United States Senator, and his harebrained solution doesn't even make sense by its own warped internal logic. Lee calls climate change an engineering problem and says, that being the case, we should be making more babies who can grow up into ingenious adults who can solve the problem. Does he expect one of them to invent a climate change reversing machine or something? What if the adults those babies grow into decide the best solution would be something like the Green New Deal? Because guess what? That's the solution. We need to cut carbon emissions. We need to shift to clean, renewable sources of fuel. We need to get a lot better at conserving our natural resources. We need to shift our priorities to long-term, ecologically sustainable ways of living, even if that means, shock horror, that the industries which are largely responsible for anthropogenic climate change won't make as much money. The Green New Deal, or something like it, will be a necessary part of any serious response to climate change, and we don't need to wait for today's babies to mature into tomorrow's scientists to figure that out. Also, how the hell are scientists and engineers, now or in coming generations, supposed to do shit about climate change when people like Mike Lee and his fellow Republicans are constantly trying to slash funding for science, education, and environmental programs? Fight climate change by having babies. Sit the fuck down, man. Number 3, NRA opposes renewal of Violence Against Women Act. Now, it probably won't surprise most of you to learn that the National Rifle Association has come out against a bill that would reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act, which expired back in December during the federal government shutdown. Even if you don't know the reason the NRA is against the Violence Against Women Act, it just makes sense, right? Of course the NRA is against it. The NRA is the worst. But the NRA being the NRA, its opposition to the bill is for the most repugnant reason imaginable. A provision of the reauthorization bill would amend federal gun laws to close the so-called boyfriend loophole. Under current law, individuals convicted of domestic violence committed against their spouses are banned from owning firearms. But that law doesn't apply to individuals convicted of violence against partners they aren't married to. The reauthorized VAWA would fix that, and also ban firearm ownership by people convicted of misdemeanor stalking offenses, and people who are the subject of a temporary protective order. A spokesperson for the NRA told Huffington Post the organization opposes the bill because it would expand the list of misdemeanor convictions that result in permanent firearm prohibitions. Right. It would expand that list to include misdemeanor convictions on stalking charges. What's the argument for allowing convicted stalkers to own firearms exactly? It had better be one hell of a compelling argument if it's good enough to compel someone to come out against the goddamn Violence Against Women Act. The NRA spokesperson accuses anti-gun zealots in Congress of inserting a gun control poison pill into an otherwise good bill. But it's only a poison pill because you assholes are such gun-loving reactionary fanatics. It's not the people who added these new provisions to the bill who are the zealots. It's the NRA. Number 4, Alex Jones shows his true face in deposition video. Last month, InfoWars founder and sentient 4chan board Alex Jones was deposed as part of a lawsuit brought against him by several family members of children murdered in the 2012 Sandy Hook shooting. Last week, video of the deposition was publicly released. Over the course of the nearly 3.25-hour deposition, we get probably the best glimpse we'll ever get of the real Alex Jones. No blustering theatrics, no vein-popping tirades, no whiplash-inducing segues to ad reads for snake oil nutritional supplements. And the truth is, even without all that, he's still essentially the same person in that deposition video that he is on his own show. He's ignorant, he's dishonest, he's utterly without remorse for the harm he causes. At one point, when Mark Bankston, the attorney deposing him, presses Jones on an InfoWars video related to Sandy Hook, Jones attempts to defend himself by insisting, "I've done almost no preparation for this." Later, when presented with an image taken from a police dash cam on December 14, 2012, Jones completely fails to recognize the significance of that date, the date of the Sandy Hook shooting. When confronted about his history of undermining the authenticity of the shooting and sowing doubt about whether or not the parents of murdered children had even actually suffered the tragedy, Jones shrugs it off and lays the blame on corporations and the government and the media, who he says make it necessary for people to question big public events. Disgusting as this is, I must tell you, I'm glad to see Jones taking this deposition so lightly. I hope he's finally held to account for his arrogance and callous disregard for the truth and snide indifference to the damage he does to the people and organizations he targets and to our culture in general. I hope this lawsuit destroys him. I hope I see him broken and beaten and then never see him again. Miserable, ruined anonymity is the fate Alex Jones has earned, and if there's any justice in the world, which is an open question, I grant you, it's what he'll be forced to suffer. And now it's time for the segment devoted to some of the other things Donald Trump has done recently to disgrace the presidency and embarrass and/or endanger the United States and the rest of the world. It's number 5, the further misadventures of Lord Dampnut. Please keep in mind, as always, the following is not a complete list. In response to Special Counsel Robert Mueller delivering his report to the Attorney General, Trump and a small army of his surrogates and defenders announced that he had been totally vindicated. The collusion delusion is dead, Trump declared last week at a rally in Michigan. Even some of Trump's detractors have been speaking out to say, hey, we should all admit we were wrong and move on. We might not like it, but we must accept the findings of Mueller's report. Just one problem with that. No one saying any of those things knows what is in Mueller's report. The report was given to Attorney General William Barr, who sent a 4-page letter to Congress saying that the report finds that the Trump campaign did not conspire or coordinate with the Russian government, but that the investigation did not come to a conclusion on the question of obstruction of justice. Barr writes, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. So even according to the summary written by Trump's own Attorney General, who has been extremely critical of the Mueller investigation in the past, probably why he got the job, the report does not amount to, as Trump himself tweeted, no collusion, no obstruction, complete and total exoneration. And let me repeat, so far as we know, no one at the White House, including Trump or Congress, has seen the actual 400-page report yet. So, and I know this will come as a shock, when Trump and his cheerleaders crow about how this proves the Russia investigation was a hoax and he's totally innocent, they're flat out making shit up. Moving on from the Mueller report, it was also reported last week that Trump's budget proposal eliminated funding for the Special Olympics. After a public outcry, Trump was asked about this and insisted that he had just authorized the funding of the Special Olympics, adding, I heard about it this morning. 2 points. First, he says, I authorized the funding as though he's a king making a decree. We're talking about a budget proposal that still has to pass Congress, and the cuts to the Special Olympics were unlikely to be accepted regardless of Trump's position on them, so he didn't really do anything. Second, he says, I heard about it this morning, when the budget proposal had been released over 2 weeks before, and the cuts to Special Olympics funding in particular had been national news since Democrats confronted Education Secretary Betsy DeVos about the proposed cuts during a House committee hearing 2 days prior. How the hell is Trump just hearing about this? I guess it took him that long to mention it on Fox and Friends. Also last week, the Justice Department submitted a filing to a federal appeals court supporting the decision of a district court judge who ruled the Affordable Care Act unconstitutional in December. The Justice Department's letter to the appeals court declares that the district court judge's ruling should be affirmed and the entirety of the ACA should be invalidated. In response to this, Trump tweeted, "The Republican Party will become the party of healthcare," by threatening to take it away from millions of people while offering no plan to replace it. Sounds like Republican healthcare to me. What else? He tweeted that he was canceling additional sanctions against North Korea. This was apparently news to the officials in his own government who had just announced those sanctions. He said on Twitter and also during a press conference to announce the departure of Linda McMahon from his administration that if Mexico doesn't stop all illegal immigration, he'll just close the border, which would be a profit-making operation for the U.S. He said this before. Closing the border, as Trump seems to envision, is still practically impossible and would be economically disastrous. Trump doesn't seem to realize this because he is a profoundly ignorant person. And finally, last week, during a visit from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump signed a proclamation officially recognizing the State of Israel's claim on the Golan Heights, a region Israel captured from Syria during the Six Days War in 1967 and has occupied ever since. No other nation in the world has ever recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights until now. Taking unilateral action to support something every other country and the United Nations has repeatedly condemned, giving the finger to allies and international law in order to win a few high fives from his supporters on the far right, setting the whole world on fire just so he can light a cigar and blow the smoke in someone else's face. The President of the United States. That's 5. Speak out, act out, resist, look after each other. Hi folks, a little bit of a format change for the Facepalm 5 beginning with this episode. I hope you don't mind and that it turned out okay in your estimation. Hope you got something out of this video, and if you did, as always, please click like and share the video and subscribe to this channel if you're not subbed already. And also please consider helping me to continue making videos like this and like all the videos I produce on this channel by becoming a supporter of this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron for as little as $1 a month, but if you can afford it and you think I'm worth it and you pledge at a level of $5 a month or higher, you get yourself a shout out at the end of the Facepalm 5, just like these folks, my newest $5 per month patrons, and their names are David Sean, thank you David, Stephen Sutton, thank you Stephen, Andrew Chase, thank you Andrew, Christopher Hammock, thank you Christopher, Lacey's, I think that's how that's pronounced, thank you Lacey's or Lyces, Chris Conant, thank you Chris, Just Maddie, thank you Just Maddie, Nick Peterson, thank you Nick, Daniel Baggett, thank you Daniel, Harsh Light News, thank you Harsh Light News, Philip Freeman, thank you Philip, Katie Schmid, thank you Katie, and Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks to everybody for your support, whether you are a patron that just hopped aboard, whether you've been a patron for years, whether you're not a patron for whatever reason and you just like the videos and watch them and share them around. Whatever form your support takes, I appreciate it so much. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.